presenting James McGee and the Fairy Tree. In an evergreen wood, in a time long ago, lived a boy in a tree whose name you may know. How did James McGee end up in a tree? Well, my friend, today you will see. The story takes place in Ireland, we know. To hear it, though, there we must go. Close your eyes, now shut them tight. We'll take a trip deep through the night, through the wind and through the woods, through the don'ts and through the shoulds. Trust me now, I am no liar. Don't look now, I see a fire. The story of James McGee is both lovely and dire. It begins on the day that his house caught fire. "Help! Someone please help me," he cried. "My parents, they are still stuck inside." The firemen came. They tried their best. They put their efforts to the test. James escaped the fire that day, but his parents did not, to his dismay. Poor James was sent to an orphan's home, a place where he felt very alone. Have any of you ever felt alone? Do you think James was feeling happy or sad? I imagine that you're right. He was probably feeling very sad and lonely. Near his new home, there was a deep, dark forest. James had always wanted to explore it. On no particular Tuesday, he wandered through the wood, never stopping to ask whether or not he should. James discovered something curious and bright. In the middle of the forest, he saw a glowing light. What could it be, he asked himself. What do you think it was? He crept a little closer, and he heard a little buzz. To James's confusion, though not to his dismay, he saw 4 lovely fairies give a song and dance display. While watching and waiting, James hid behind a tree, for he had a fear that the fairies they would see. When the song and dance were done, James he loudly clapped. Forgetting he had hidden, now James he was trapped. The fairies soon were near him, flying all around, asking 1,000 questions of how their home he'd found. James told his story. "I was walking through the forest when I saw a lovely light. I could not do but follow it, for it was so bright." The fairy Rena, in charge of the rain, asked him a question again and again. Why is a little boy so small walking through the woods at all? Her fairy brother Ivan, who masters the ice, asked another question not so nice. "If you had proper parents, you would not be bad. It cannot be the case. Oh, how sad." Does James have parents? Do you remember what happened to them? You're right. James doesn't have parents to look after him any longer. I bet Ivan's comment made him very sad. To the fairy's surprise, James spoke up. "My parents, they died. A lot I have cried. I tell you my story and I have not lied. Please let me stay in the forest with you. If here I can stay, I'll always be true." The fairies, they stared deep into James' face. They feared this small boy and the whole human race. You see, the fairies, they were all orphans too. Their parents had died in the Song River blue. "We'll take you, small boy, with us you shall live. Family we are and a home we can give. We will share the raising of you as the seasons do turn. Of the forest and sky, these things you will learn." And this is the way that our James McGee began to live within a tree. James McGee lived in the fairy tree from his 7th to his 14th year. He lived and grew with the fairies, learning to choose love over fear. Upon his 14th birthday, the Fairy King arrived. This was truly an honor, for his praise they often strived. The Fairy King can take many forms. What do you think he'll be today? Those are some very interesting guesses. Let's continue on our way. The Fairy King arrived in quite magnificent form, prancing and dancing wildly, flying in like a storm. He spoke to the 4 fairies, asking questions all about James. He thanked them all for raising him, calling each their names. Rena the Rain Fairy, you have done well. Ivan, my son, stories you did tell. Faerie the Fire Fairy, lessons you did teach. And William of the Wind Fairy, gently you did preach. All 4 of you have taught, guided, led, and loved James well. I will now grant you one wish, if now it you will tell. The fairies gathered in a circle, thinking deeply now. Soon they faced the Fairy King in a lowly bow. Fairy King, the wish we seek is not for us but James. We wish that you would make him a true fairy, us the same. The Fairy King granted the wish as he said, doing it through a chant that he had led. By the light of the moon so blue, may this boy be a fairy true. Music began out of nowhere to play. The fairies did clap and began to say, hey, hey, hey. Now James McGee is a real fairy true, much more fairy than me or you. Now that he has a fairy name, his life will never be the same.